did an interview recently with George Farah, who's a very famous coach in this industry, a guru, and he went through cancer, and then he kind of had a revelation afterwards where he now is sort of going against insulin and saying that he regrets suggesting for his clients to use it and so on and so forth. And he's kind of like almost like regretting a lot of the things he's done before. How do you feel about that and the insulin specifically? Do you feel like it's like everybody's opinion now? Or do you feel like it's still going to be used forever in bodybuilding?
I think in general, the insulin is really misunderstood still. Let me tell you honestly, unless you're like at that upper echelon, like the elite, I think that those guys have a good grasp on what to do. Like Milos Sarshev was one of the first guys that was explaining, and Milos was very in depth with it. I mean, he had long acting, short acting, medium acting, he had everything in his. And of course, they called Nasser the insulin wizard. Like those guys were really into not just controlling the insulin, but understanding how it worked. And I feel like nowadays, there's guys taking insulin that got no business taking it. I mean, it was a lot cheaper back in the day. It was like $17. When the price went up, it kind of kept a lot of people away from it. But they'll be on testosterone and anadrol. Like, I want to throw insulin in there. I'm like, for what? Like, that makes no sense. And when you take the insulin without the growth hormone and the thyroid, you just get fat. Like, it makes you fatter, like, very quickly. The whole thing is when you're taking growth hormone, your body doesn't utilize blood sugar the same way anymore. You actually have high blood sugar. It makes you insulin resistant on the growth hormone. So once your body gets to that point, you add the insulin to take care of the food from the GH. So now you have the combination. When you're taking one without the other, some kind of balance is going to go off. And now when you're on the insulin and the GH together, your thyroid starts to decrease a little bit. Then you throw some T3 in it. So like what they're not understanding is they hear, oh, insulin's the key. What really happened was back in the day when the pros were talking about it, insulin is the key, meaning insulin is the key to getting the growth hormone to work better. They didn't mean insulin is the key by itself. So now, people take that and run with it in forums. And I've seen people like, oh, I'm doing this much. I've seen people doing 30, 40, 50 IUs of insulin. And I'm like, no wonder why, you're passing out in the gym and stuff. Like, that's more than a diabetic would take. Why heard to be this big, I need to take this dosage. And it's like, these weird myths that are coming about insulin. But insulin is one of those things, again, like diuretics, if you mess it up right now, you're dead. Like, that's all there is to it. Most people, I don't think, would take enough to die. They would pass out and they would come to and be confused. And, I think it would be enough to scare them to not do it again. But, it's one of those things where, many of the people using it don't even understand how it works. They just know that Dan Duchaine was kind of the first one telling you 1 gram of carbs or 10 grams of carbs for every IU of insulin. Like, he came up with that formula, and then what happens is everybody experiments with it. And they kind of find their own ways, and these gurus, you would call them, start talking about it. But also, the higher insulin level is, the higher IGF level is, the earlier you die. There's plenty of study backing that up. The lower you keep your insulin throughout your life, the lower your IGF is, the longer that you live. Now, in George Farah's case, insulin is do what? It shuttles the carbohydrates, glucose. He has cancer. Glucose is pretty much the primary food for cancer that fuels it. So if he didn't know he had cancer and he was taking insulin and IGF especially, the cancer is going to grow even faster. Now, I'm not saying that's what he did, but what I'm saying is that probably is why he's like, look, I don't think this stuff is very good. You know what I mean? I don't believe insulin and IGF cause cancer. But I do believe if you have the genetic predisposition or already have it underlying that you don't know about, it is going to increase the rate that cancer grows a lot faster.